If you don't know how many Aperture cards you have, how are you going to get a quote from scanning companies to actually do the digitization project? The answer is you won't, because they won't know what they're doing or how many they're going to scan. It's very hard for companies like ours, scanning companies, to get you a quote if they don't know what the scope of the project's going to be. The difference between a project with 10,000 Aperture cards and something like 100,000 Aperture cards is significant. And it's in your best interest to be as accurate as possible so that when you do get an estimate for your project, it doesn't go off the rails when you actually do it and the number's completely different. But I'll be honest, unless you have something like a couple hundred cards or fewer and you're actually counting each one out to get your exact number, you're really not gonna know how many cards you have until you're done scanning them all. That's just the nature of these types of projects because of the quantities involved. Okay, so to get an idea of how many cards you have, because you're looking for ballparks, you're looking for a good estimate. It's not gonna be exact, like I mentioned, unless you have maybe a couple dozen, couple hundred cards, and you're actually counting them all out. But to get that good guesstimate, that ballpark quantity, so you can give it to a scanning company to get you your price for the project, the first method is called the pinch and inch method. And basically what you're gonna do is you're gonna go to your cards, which I'm gonna assume they're packed semi-nicely, maybe in boxes or cabinets, drawers, whatever they are, and they're gonna be stacked together, just kind of side by side, probably in rows. What you're gonna do is you're just gonna take a ruler, lay it on top of those cards, and measure out 1 inch. You don't wanna squeeze them all together and kind of manipulate them. You wanna leave them as they exist because you're gonna use this number later. So you take that ruler, lay it on top of the cards, measure 1 inch. You're gonna take out that inch, and then you are going to count that batch of cards. What you're gonna find is you'll probably have around 100 to 120 cards per inch if they're stacked pretty normally like we typically see. And let's say it is, to make it easy, just make math easy, let's say it is 100 cards per inch, and then you're just gonna take that number and extrapolate it, do a little math to get the total quantity of your Aperture card collection. For a quick example, let's say you measure out 200 inches of cards. You have multiple boxes, drawers, whatever. You measure out a total of 200 inches. And when you did the pinch and inch, you measured 100 cards per inch. So if there are 200 inches at 100 cards per inch, that's gonna be 20,000 Aperture cards. Again, ballpark. You're getting a good idea, a good estimate of what the project is, not an exact number. It won't be perfect, but it's in the ballpark, and for a company like ours, that's exactly what we need to give you an idea of what your project will be and to start scoping it out. The second method to estimate how many Aperture cards you have is the drawer and cabinet method, and these are typically for companies with larger collections, so bigger organizations or places, departments, like a building department maybe has a lot of Aperture cards because it's in the nature of building departments to have them. So if you have a larger collection, you may have a dedicated style cabinet, such as a Russ Bassett cabinet that were made to hold Aperture cards. And with these, you may have like a 3-foot wide cabinet that has 4 drawers, or you may have something that's like a 1.5 foot wide with 6 drawers or something. Any variation of that. You can still use the pinch and inch method, which will get you a good estimate. But if these are full, most of them actually will tell you how many Aperture cards are in each of these types of cabinets. So depending on which cabinet you have and they're full, you'll know how many Aperture cards are inside that cabinet. And if we're talking about the Russ Bassett's, the horizontal style cabinets, each drawer holds about 8,200 cards, and the vertical style cabinets have about 8,000 cards per drawer. So if you have the vertical style cabinet and it has, let's say, 5 drawers and each one holds about 8,000, then if it's full, you're gonna have roughly 40,000 Aperture cards in that cabinet. Basically, if they're full, you're just gonna figure out which style you have, how many drawers you have, do the quick math, and again, you have a simple ballpark to provide to your scanning partner. Now, the third method is interesting. It's probably the least used. I've never actually personally used it, but it's by weight. And what you do with this is, let's say you have 10 bankers boxes of Aperture cards, and you're thinking, well, I could do the pinch and inch, but maybe they're not organized properly, kind of thrown around, just jumbled together, not nice, neat stacks, so it's gonna be harder to do the pinch and inch. You can do by weight by taking out one card and getting a scale. You know, like a little kitchen scale could actually work for a smaller weights. You put the card on there and you weigh the card. Then, again, we're saying you have about 10 bankers boxes of cards. Get an empty bankers box and weigh that. So now you have the weight of one card and you have the weight of an empty banker's box. Now you just take the banker's box full of cards, you plop it on there, and you basically take the total weight, subtract the empty banker's box weight, and then you have the Aperture card weight, just divide it by 1 unit, whatever that weight of the single Aperture card was, and you should have an idea of how many cards you have in that collection. And assuming all boxes are roughly the same, you could then say, okay, whatever that number is times 10, there's my collection of Aperture cards. Again, the pinch and inch is probably the best, but that assumes they're stacked together nicely. If they're not, they're kind of thrown together, you could use this weight method. And since you're watching this video, I'm gonna assume that you know what Aperture cards are, and you probably know there are different types of Aperture cards, and those plus the quantity can tie into the total price of your project. So quantity is probably the most important factor. How many you have is going to determine that price and the scope, but the type of card can be very important as well. And the main types of Aperture cards are the standard 35mm, which is basically you have the card and then there's the aperture where the film goes. That's why it's called an Aperture card, with the single image of the microfilm. It'll probably be something like a blueprint, an engineering drawing, or maybe an oversized book or something like that. This is the most common type of Aperture card we see, just the 35mm single image in that frame. Then you have the Hollerith 35mm Aperture card, and what that is basically the same as the standard 35mm, but on the actual card portion, so here's the Aperture, here's the actual card portion, there are gonna be a bunch of hole punches, and that's the Hollerith data. Those hole punches typically will match whatever that title block on the top is. So whatever is written out, like drawing number, revision number, date, whatever's on there, that's written on the title block, and then you see the Hollerith punches, those should match. Occasionally there won't be a title block and all you have is the Hollerith. The thing with the Hollerith cards is you actually can scan them and have a special scanner read those hole punches and then spit out the index information that should say exactly what that card is based on those punches. The thing with Hollerith though is that sometimes it doesn't work when it goes through these scanners, it just doesn't read, or it may be a bit messy when it comes out. Again, it just depends on the Hollerith itself. When it works, it does. When it doesn't, it doesn't. There's not a lot you can do. It's just a Hollerith reader when it scans, and that's the information that comes out. And then lastly are the 16mm cards. These could be either the standard with no Hollerith, or it can be the Hollerith style. But basically in that film portion on that Aperture, on the right side of the card, the right, when you're looking at right reading, it'll have smaller images. It won't be like a engineering drawing or something like that, just a single image in that frame. It'll be multiple smaller images, maybe office-sized documents where multiple were photographed together to make that single card. So if you have these smaller 16mm images and you scan your Aperture cards, you can receive it as just that single frame as your digital file, or you may want each individual image cropped or basically framed, where we see 4 in one frame and then we take each individual page, let's say there are 4 of them, and we make each of those a digital file. So that's called framing or cropping. It can be more expensive, but it's up to you if you want to do that based on what you need on the output. Like I mentioned before, you're probably not going to know the exact number of Aperture cards you have when you go into a project, and that's completely fine. It's not uncommon in the world of microfilm scanning, microfiche scanning, Aperture cards, even paper records. No one really knows how many pages or images or units they have until it's done, because there's so many things to count. It's very hard to do. But what you are looking for is a good ballpark, a good estimate. So when you contact a company, let's say us, you can say, hey, I think I have roughly 50 to 60,000 Aperture cards, and here's how I came up with that. That's fantastic, and it'll really help us provide a scope and a price to you based on that information before we get to kind of look at it or even do the project. So if you're looking for a company to scan your Aperture cards, or you just have questions about them, hit the link that I put in the comments below. I'll pin it up there, and send us a note, and we'll get back to you very quickly to see how we can help and potentially work with you on your project. And for more details on Aperture card scanning, get really into the nitty-gritty of Aperture cards, watch the video right here, and thank you for watching.